Get comfortable. Let's start by taking a nice inhale through your nose and an exhale through your nose. I'm going to begin with this warm-up of simply relaxing, letting go. Start to relax your body completely so that it's in its most natural state. Take a look and observe if there's any areas of tension, in particular, the area between your brows. Relax your jaw. Relax the corners of your mouth. Relax those shoulders fully, let them drop. Relax your hips all the way down to your toes. Using your breath to release in any areas of tension that you may have. You know what those areas are, those knots in your back, in your shoulder, behind your shoulder blades, the base of your neck. And then now begin to relax and release all the noise, the chit-chat happening in your mind. With every exhalation, letting go for now. Another voice or dialogue comes up, no problem. Use your breath to let it go. Then spend a few breaths relaxing your mind, settling your mind. Any grasping desires, afflictions. Now is the time to release. So as you settle your body, speech, and mind, you'll spend the remainder of the time simply focusing on breathing, not just through your nose, but with your body. Just breathe and observe. What happens when breath moves through your body? Nice. Okay. Just take a moment and stretch if you need to, or adjust your seat, and we'll go right into a 9-minute. Okay, ready? Settle back and begin to settle down again. Releasing all control and allowing your breath to flow naturally. Settling your mind in its most natural state, relaxing your body fully, and releasing any noise, any speech or dialogue happening in the space of the mind. Most of us have very afflicted minds. We tend to grasp onto states of mind as if they're really mine. We reify thoughts that happen all the time. The mind is so powerful, you know that. And often we say that thoughts occur in the space of the mind. So let's begin to examine what that really means. Where do these images occur? What is this mind in which mental events take place in? Can you see it? Can you observe it? Begin to try to examine the specimen that you call mind, in which mental events take place in. If the mind is really there, where did it come from? Will it always exist? We often also use the mind when we are observing our thoughts, our memories, and our dreams. Every emotion, every image that arises is a valid basis of designation for the term mind. So, start to try to turn your awareness on the events rising, these mental events that arise in the space of your mind. If they really exist from their own side and have a power in of it themselves, then where do these thoughts come from? When the thoughts arise and the emotions arise and events arise, once they have risen, where is there? Where do they go? Try to start examining the location of your thoughts. Perhaps it's easier to identify where the mind is if you can see where your thoughts that are produced from the mind go. Try to examine closely. Thoughts don't exist forever. Emotions don't exist forever. Or do they? If you have a little glimpse of clarity, or maybe a little breakthrough moment, you may realize that your mind doesn't really emerge from anything, and it's not really located anywhere. And it really doesn't seem to go anywhere. And perhaps you've had a glimpse where you can start to at least intellectually understand that your mind isn't self-existent, which leads to empty. So rest there if there is some clarity on the idea of the emptiness of your mind. The mind only exists because of your conceptual designation that you've created, the construct of it being my mind. Okay. Nice. How was that? It's hard or easy, or not maybe easy. I don't think it's easy, but how was that? Was that difficult to understand? Great. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's so slippery.
It's very slippery.
It's like, I mean, it's like something, it's like looking for something you don't know what it looks like, you know? So,
Yeah.
like locationally, it feels like it's right behind your eyes.
Yeah.
This you.
Well, neuroscience has said, right? Your mind is your brain.
Yeah. But when my mind drifts off, when I'm not like trying to meditate or focus, when my mind drifts off into some story, it's not in my head.
No. Yeah.
The thoughts are like, I'm not here, you know.
Yeah. Because you don't feel it in your head, right? It's like when you have pain in your body or you have sensations in your body, my foot is cold, right? I can feel my foot being cold, right? It feels that real. And there's something with your mind where you're thinking, where is it? If it is the source, right, of all my thoughts that feel real, then of course the mind should be just as real, right? Just as absolute, just as concrete, just as self-existent. Okay, great. As we say in Tibetan Buddhism, you get to what? Cook it. Cook it.
Can I?
Yes, please.
This is kind of a question that hit me. Is the mind that afflicts us the mind that we're reborn with?
Are you asking an answer?
It's just, where are the thoughts? Where are the thoughts coming from? If we say, okay, so this thought that's interrupting my meditation is coming from my brain and it's afflicting me. Is it me? Is it the me that has a past and a present and a future? Or is it the me that is in this body now that is going to be gone at some point? You know, is the brain generating this thought, this affliction that I'm holding on to, and I'm trying to find where it is as if it's important when it's not even me.
Why do you feel like it's not you?
Well, what is me?
Right.
First of all, like what me, what mind is carrying through into the next life? It came from the previous life. Like in my previous life, I clearly wasn't afflicted by these thoughts that are coming through my head now. Right? I mean, the life I had 3 lifetimes ago, Trump never even passed through my brain. And now it does, and it afflicts me. And well, that's not me. That's not the me that I want to find here in meditation, right?
But it's not the specifics, right? It's not the conventional reality that's the affliction, right? So if there's anger, who you're angry at is your own projection based on your karma in this lifetime that you can recall. But your seeds of anger are there. And sometimes we talked about this in course 2, you have karma sometimes from past lifetimes that come in that are so strong that some of your biggest afflictions are usually karmas that you've had. Like, I'm very impatient. That's the way it is, you know, it's something I work with, but it's much bigger than some other people, you know, who just have a natural propensity to not be that. I mean, to me, I don't feel like I feel like they're patient, but to them, they just think that's normal and I'm just a little weird, right? So how much are the afflictions, your past karmas or your past lives that are coming in versus how much have you cultivated that and made that part of your first or your current state? Who you're angry at. I mean, the fact is that if you're an aggravated person, it doesn't matter who you're aggravated at. You're just aggravated. Anything can aggravate you. I have a grandfather who's like so good at that, you know, like unbelievable. Doesn't matter. Everything's great and still very aggro. So I don't think it's really about what it's at, but really the emotion or the affliction itself that is worth looking at, right? Because most of us could probably create an affliction about, I mean, whatever your main triggers are, you could probably make that happen with almost anything if you wanted to. You know, I could sit here and find a few different reasons to be impatient about my tea, for sure, you know. So, okay. I would think about it though more. That's a nice one. All right, here we go. Course 7. We're going to talk about the 9 stages of meditation. Can you say Semne Gu? Again, Semne Gu. So Sem is mind, Ne is state, and Gu is 9. 9 states of mind or meditation. As you encounter the 5 problems that we talked about last week, and the 8 antidotes or 8 corrections, you're going to also go through the process of 9 levels. And the thing that excites me so much about today's class, which is so very geeky, is that as I was going through and prepping for class of the 9 states, it also made me realize not just the process, it contextualized and made it more real for me, as real as it could be, of the 9 stages of meditation. Not only do they apply to the work I do on the cushion, the meditations on the cushion, but they very much, I saw, apply to the work I do off the cushion when I'm meditating about things that are not about Buddhism. So for instance, I'm a creative person, or I try to be on a good day. And when I'm going through a project that I'm working on, I realize that my 9 states of meditation that I see here directly corresponded with my creative processes that I go through. And I'd be curious to see, like, for any of you who have passion projects or things that you love that you really want to get into, or things that you are trying to do that excite you, you know, that you have some sort of practice in, you know, whether it's even on the cushion or other things that you do, whether it's hobbies that intrigue you or that you're passionate about, or activities that you do, or I don't know. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we talked about marathon running, right? Or last week, talked about marathon, like whether it's training, but I would see and check out if these also apply. But I noticed for myself, it was, I could actually articulate, I've been stuck on this creative project right now, and I could articulate what stage I was in. So that was very exciting to me because it's an antidote and a process I can see of my progress and where I'm stuck and what I need to do moving forward. Does that make sense? Like, that was just, I don't know. It's always nice when it kind of aligns to what feels real, which isn't, but okay, so number 1, sem jokpa. Again, sem jokpa. So sem again is mind, jokpa is putting. So this is putting the mind on an object in meditation. Okay, you have to, so the first step is, right, if you're going to meditate, right, you have to have an object. There has to be a focus. How do you get an object? You can think about it, but how do you decide what that object is going to be? Who decides for you, or how do you decide? You decide?
You define your purpose for that meditation for that day.
But how do you know what that purpose can be? How do you know what to start with? I'm a meditator, I'm starting out, or something's going on. How do I decide what my object is going to be?
You have a teacher.
You have a teacher. So in our lineage, a lot of the times we talk about your practice until you have a repertoire of different meditations that you can go to, right? Your object should be given to you by a teacher. Okay, just first and foremost. So the way that there's a graphic that Geshe Michael had used for these, I think the first 5 or 6, and then the last 3 thought it was too difficult, so he kind of just stopped. So maybe we can even come up with one. But the idea of Samjokpa, it's this idea, first of all, you have to have a teacher give you a topic. It has to do with multiple things. It has one to do with your safety, to make sure you're doing something that's appropriate for where you're at and you don't hurt yourself in any way, mentally, which is a lot more impactful than physically, right? So you don't want someone messing with your mind and you doing some weird stuff and feeling like it's agitating you. The second thing about finding a teacher for meditations is that they can be able to track your progress and get a sense of whether or not you're moving forward or backwards, right? So that's the other reason. Semjokpa is the ability to have concentration, and it's that you can actually hold an object for a brief moment, and that's it. It's just now and then, okay? There's really no continuity at this point. So there's these dotted lines that you're seeing up here. And at this point, you'll actually think when you start to do this first step that your mind is much worse than it's ever been. It's a lot more distracted, that you have a hard time even focusing than you've ever done before. But the fact is that it's not that your mind is worse than it's ever been, right? Right? It's that you just never really pay attention to the fact that you're that distracted, that you actually have a difficult time sitting and staying focused on one object. So that's what Samjokpa is. Okay, so it's you know an object, whether it's your breath, right, or a deity, or any visualization that you may have. You know that there's an object, you can hold it for kind of every little bit. There's just it's sporadic, right? It's just moments of it, and you kind of deviate away and you come back in. Okay. Number 2, gyondu jokpa. Again, gyondu jokpa. So gyondu is in a stream, and jokpa is putting the mind on the object. So this is putting the mind on the object in a stream. So it means that there's a little bit more of continuity. There's one thought after another. One way that they gauged in the scriptures of what means stream is you can actually focus for as long as you would do mantras on a rosary, or not a rosary, but your mala beads. Does that make sense? So I don't know for those of you, which is about, it depends on what mantra you have, but that's about like 3 minutes, between 3 and a little under 5 minutes. Okay, so you can actually stay focused on an object for a little under about 5 minutes is what they're saying. Okay, that's Gyonjupa, Gyondujupa. Is there a question? Oh, yes. This one?
Yeah, with the.
Oh, yes, of course. Uh-huh.
5 minutes straight without any
Mm-hmm. You can stay focused about 5 minutes. It's when you can say mantras that they talk about in the scriptures, Om Mani Padme Hum. So you do that 108 times on your rosary. There's about the same time that they would say. If you can do that, which is it depends how fast you do it, but between 3 and 5 minutes, if you can do that and stay focused, then you're at stage 2. Okay. Before then, even 5 minutes is difficult. Yes.
Could your object be your mantra?
Yes.
Like, do people
Totally. Yeah, for sure. There are practices where but like even so your object is your focus is doing your mantra and just staying focused on that, and you're doing that without like kind of doing it and then thinking about do I have to go get laundry now or whatever. Yeah. So but in this stage, it's going to feel like your mind is on the object for a few minutes ish, and then it will feel like it gets distracted. So you understand that there's distraction there. You have gaps of it, but it's a little bit more than stage 1, where you just kind of think about it and then you're who knows where you're at, and then you come back after a while. This one's a little bit the time span's a little longer. Okay, so. The periods of distraction are a little longer still than the periods of concentration. So you have more distraction still in comparison to your time of focus. The time that you wander off of your object relative, right, to your staying on your object is longer. And at this point, you're really at the first states of your agitation and dullness. You're starting to really get a sense of the fact that you have some sort of agitation and dullness. It's a little bit more coarse at this level. Like you understand whether you have coarse agitation or coarse dullness. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Number 3, can we say lente jokpa? Again, lente jokpa. So this is patch-like fixation of putting the mind on the object. And I think about this, when I'm meditating, but also when I'm thinking about projects I don't want, I'm having difficulty doing. It takes a while. It's like, I know I need to do it, and I get distracted. I usually like check my email, or my text, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I have to do this again. And then it's at some point I get so into it that I suddenly don't check my emails, right? Or my texts. And all I'm doing is, but it's the same thing when I'm working or when I'm, and it was interesting. I only bring that parallel too, because I start to see how much strength my mind has to even stay focused on things outside my cushion and also on my cushion. It's just interesting to start to get a sense of how much control does my mind really have, and when I'm working, I can see that. And when I'm on my cushion, I can see that. And so it makes me think of different ways of how do I start to exercise the muscle of my mind and my patience and my practice often on the cushion. That's the only reason I'm bringing that parallel in. So Lende Jokpa looks something like this. Ooh, sorry, did I just go too fast? That was weird. Okay, so it's basically looking at, you have a continuity. So your stream of concentration has gotten longer, but there are these breaks. So you have these patches. They're not really gaps, but they're just short breaks within it, within your stream of concentration. Your mind will wander still at this stage, but you catch yourself more instead of just letting it go and not knowing where it went. And then at some point being like, oh, I forgot I'm supposed to be meditating. So you're in a stage where you can actually concentrate and you have focuses, you will wander, but you'll know how to, you'll know that you're off the object to come back. You can identify that. Whereas other times, you know, sometimes you wander and you don't even know when you started wandering. It just happened. That's not happening at this point. You know that you're wandering and that you need to bring it back. You know, there's still an awareness of your object at this point.
Could there be, I mean, wouldn't that be similar to like level 1 or stage 1?
Yeah. Yeah, there are parallels that you'll start to see.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and at this stage too, so these are integrated within, right? So as you go through the different stages that we talked about, these are also different levels of your meditation state that you'll go through. So there are very similar parallels that you'll see. Yeah, or not. Yeah, they'll parallel. They'll kind of. That'd be kind of interesting to see what a chart would look like. You know, one stage versus another, and how that works together.
Is it similar to that like description of the elephant? You heard that there's like this graphic and chart, like the mind is like this wild elephant, and like you have to stake it into the ground, and then like eventually that elephant will become tamed.
That's the diagram of the 9 stages.
Of meditation.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
that's exactly what it is. Totally. Yeah, very good. Yeah, and I actually have the image of that. I will share it with you guys on email or put it in Dropbox if you want it. But there's a really beautiful illustration of the 9 stages of meditation. That's right. Yeah, very good.
The elephant represents something. I forget what it is.
I don't know.
It goes from black to white in different stages
Yeah.
as well. Oh, cool. Yeah.
Is that it?
It might be
Got a
diamonds.
mental
Yeah.
picture of it.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So in this stage, on number 4, it's characterized as your shorter gaps in concentration at this stage. I'm sorry, number 3. Yeah, sorry. So the gaps become shorter that you have of during your concentration. So the time of your concentration is much larger than your gaps that you have, but you still have the gaps. There's still dullness and agitation happening, and it's still coarse. It's not subtle at this point. Okay. All right. Number 4, can you say Newar, Jekpa? Newar, Jekpa. So Newar is closely, and Jekpa is mind is placed on object. Do the first 3 steps relate to anyone? Like you can identify and understand. Okay. Everyone here is like, no way. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm at number 9.
What would you say our first object is? Like going to step 1, like us being in this class.
Yeah.
What is our object?
Sure. So when we do the meditations for each week, originally your first object is relaxing. That's it. I mean, that's your first object. Your second one was your breath. You know, it's focusing on your body breathing and getting a sense of what does that even feel like? How does it trigger in your body? And today the object was locating the space of your mind. So those are the 3 different objects that you have as of now. There are also other objects that we have that we talked about that are in the homework, whether it was the different postures, right? The 8-point posture that we talked about. So that can also be other things too that you can look at and think about, or the preliminaries. That's also okay. So this one's characterized with your concentration now being steady. The mind at this point has placed, the mind can very much be focused on the object. At this point, your recollection is very strong, meaning that it's pretty impossible at this point in stage 5 to lose the object completely. I mean, sorry, stage 4. I'm sorry, stage 4. You can wander around your object, but you don't lose the object. Okay, which is different than stage 3, where you actually wander off and you're coming back and you're patching it. This is, you have the object completely in focus at all times, but at the same time you can still be wandering while your awareness fixated on the object.
Like the intensity is not there.
Mm-hmm. But the clarity is there, right? Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So it's kind of the same thing as like, it's a bad example, but like driving and texting or walking and texting, you're like definitely walking and you're on the sidewalk, but your mind is, doing, I'm the worst about it, guys. So I can speak from my personal experience. It's pretty bad. So I don't know, maybe that's a good thing. I'm stage 5 of texting. No. So our stage 4. Okay, so this stage, right, so you can, actually, no, it's not intensity. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about it again. It's, you have recollection, you have the object, you have clarity, and you have fixation, you just don't have intensity. Oh, is that what you said? Okay. Yeah, exactly, right? So you're there, you're completely aware, you know what the object is, you're just not, so it's like holding the cup loosely, right? Okay, so that's what this would be. There are no gaps though in this process. So you have never, like, you don't let go of the cup, it's always there, okay? There's still coarse dullness though in this stage technically. You're not in subtle yet. So there's still some coarse dullness that's happening. Because you, up to this point, you're focused on just not losing the object. So there's still coarse dullness and agitation. When you get to the point where you're not focused on not losing the object and you're focused on addressing the subtle dullness and agitation, then you get into subtle. But at this point, your main objective is to stay focused on the object. So there's still a sense of coarse dullness and agitation. Does that make sense? No. What doesn't make sense about it?
I feel like if you can hold on to the object and then still doing something else,
Yeah.
that's not concentration on that one thing. You're like multitasking.
Yeah, no, it is a constant, there's a focus, but there's not an intensity to it, right? It's like last week we talked about, I'm sorry, there's not a fixation to it. Last week we talked about clarity, intensity, and fixation. So it's like I'm holding a cup and I can hold it loose, right? Or I can grasp it really tight. But just because I'm holding the cup, so I'm focused on holding something, but there's different levels of intensity that I can have, right? So in that same way, your concentration, your meditation that you have, you can still be focused on an object, but there's still a different level of intensity that you can have on that, or clarity, where it's not foggy. So that's what you're looking at. At this point, you have a very steady sense of concentration. You can stay focused on your object. And there is a clarity there, and there is an intensity there, but there isn't you can still wander around your object. So it's almost like having, like we've talked about this, and I believe it's almost like, I won't say it's definite because it hasn't been like this described this way in the scripture, but the impression that I get is it's like you can like you can look at this cup right in front of me that I'm holding. You see this cup, you can be looking at this cup and having an analysis. It's a paper cup, coffee, tea. You can identify the color. You can be observing the cup completely fixated or completely focused. It's clear. You have a really clear way of like an intensity of looking at it, but at the same time, you could be thinking about being on the beach at the same time, right? So you're fixated on the object, or you have an intensity on the object, you focus on the object, you have a focus, right? You haven't left the object, but you can be thinking about other things while you're doing it at the same time. That's still a kind of meditation. It's not the optimal way, but it's still a part of the process, right? But you haven't forgotten, you haven't like left the object and said, oh, sunshine, beach, vacation, I want to be somewhere warm, and you're totally away from it. It's not that. You have the object still in your mind, but you're thinking about other things and wandering around this object, you know? Or it could just be other things that, you know, it's like, oh, that cup's so nice. Wouldn't that be nice if that cup was on the beach with me right now, right? And you take it with you. Like, there's so many different ways you can create that scenario, right? I mean, how many times do you guys do that where your object is there and yet you then integrate it into, like, you know, I have like meditations of my teachers, you know, and I'll have these meditations and focus on my teacher, my teacher, my teacher. And then suddenly it's like, why did my teacher say that? You know, and that becomes a whole, and the object is my teacher. I still have my teacher as an object, but there's a lot of wandering and noise around it. Okay. So there's still some sort of agitation and dullness is what we call it around it. Yeah. Okay. We're going to take a 10-minute break now, and we'll wrap up with the last 4 and I think wrap up class early. Question for you, for those of you that are here. Next week is Thanksgiving. Do you guys want? Yeah, I know. That's why.
Wait, Tuesday?
Next Thursday.
No.
Next Thursday. Oh.
Thanksgiving's never been on a Tuesday, but that's cool.
We have duck, we never have turkey, and we don't celebrate.
Is your family in the New York area?
Yeah, upstate.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're funny. So next week is Thanksgiving. So I'm just asking to see if do you all want to have class still, or shall we take a break and resume the week after?
I'll be
Okay.
I'll be
Okay.
I'll be
Okay. Okay. We'll do it. Good. All right. Good. Awesome. Okay. 10-minute break, and we'll resume with number 5. Let me turn this off. Okay, so at stage 4, at that point, I just wanted to add, you no longer struggle to keep the object, right? So what they'll say, what the scriptures say is that after at stage 4, they say that your ability to recall has completely matured. Right? It's like you have no problem recalling the object, getting back on focus. But the one thing that you're lacking at this point is you're still struggling with the quality of your meditation. So just note, right, at this point, you can concentrate completely. You have no problem staying focused on the object. You got it. You got it in the bag. There's a little noise around it, right? And you're not leaving the object. But that at this point, you don't have the best quality of meditation. Okay? So just because you can stay focused on the object doesn't mean the quality is the best quality. Kind of a bummer, no? It makes me think, because when I have good meditations, some of the times I come out and I'm like, that was so good because I felt so focused. I wasn't distracted. I usually kind of qualify the quality of my meditations of how distracted I am. Like, I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. You weren't distracted today, you know? But the fact that you just stay on your object doesn't necessarily mean you have a quality meditation. Okay? So you're still struggling with that.
So what would a quality meditation?
You'll see. Number 5, can you say dulwar? Jepa. Again, dulwar? Jepa. So dulwar is to bring under control, and jepa is to do it. So what happens usually at stage 4 is you now have this focus, you have agitation and dullness, you know that you're wandering around the object, but you have a sense that your quality it could be brought up a few notches. You know that the quality is suffering at this point. Okay, there's still some sort of not suffering. There's always suffering. There's still some sort of agitation and dullness. So what usually happens after stage 4 is you kind of freak out, maybe a little bit, and you kind of force your mind and you constrict your mind, and so that what ends up happening is a sense of subtle dullness. So one of the biggest dangers that happens after stage 4 in stage 5 is a subtle dullness. You've almost you realize that the quality isn't there, and so what you usually do is that you withdraw your mind too much because you're trying to focus so much. You tighten it up, and there's a dullness that starts to happen. Okay, and it's at this point it's a bit subtle. You're trying to, so at stage 5, when you can realize that now you don't have a coarseness, and you're trying to, I don't know, I guess one way to say is take your meditation or make your meditation deeper or take it more seriously, or however way you want to think of it. There's a tightness that happens, and a force that happens where you're trying to force your mind to focus more. And so a subtle dullness starts to happen. And when that happens and you can see that's happening, then you are doing stage 5 where you're bringing the mind under control. Okay. So now you're starting to play with the subtleties of it. At this point, you're starting to play with watchfulness. So you're really starting to play with it, and you're using watchfulness, obviously, from the very get-go when you have your first object. But at this point, you're really starting to amp up the power of really watching. So at this point, you're not even watching whether or not your mind's on the object. You have that. You're watching the level of dullness that's happening. Okay, you've slipped in. You've forced yourself to say, I'm going to focus more on my object, and in that force starts a subtle dullness, and now you're focusing on being very, very cautious and watching the subtleties of your dullness. Does that make sense? So in this stage, you have fixation and clarity, but you have no intensity. Okay, that's subtle dullness. Okay. Number 6, can you say Shiwar? Jepa. Again, Shiwar? Jepa. So Shiwar is peace and Jepar is make it. And in this situation, after number 6, you've pretty much you overdid it with the dullness, because now you have the subtle dullness and you've swung the other way. And now you've overdone it where now there's subtle agitation.
Subtle?
Yeah. It's the first time and it's the only time ever in the scriptures where they talk about subtle agitation. I know. Because we talked about it last week. I was thinking about Nova today. It's like, I wish she was here, because she asked about subtle agitation last week.
Oh, yeah.
And here we go. Yeah. Yeah. It's good that you noticed that too. So this is about making your mind calm to correct the subtle agitation, right? So you go from complete focus, there's coarse agitation and dullness. You realize that you're starting to hone it in. As you hone it in, usually you'll kind of fling to a subtle dullness, and then from there you're going to fling to a subtle agitation that happens. Which is interesting that there's like a dullness that happens first and then an agitation.
I don't know if this has anything to do with the right given answer, but you know, when very rare occasions, when bliss arises, do you think, because like usually it happens like when I'm very focused on meditation, like when I really feel like I'm meditating, and then bliss arises, and then I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. I could see that as being like an agitation, like the
Sure.
like the, I'm sure as you go deeper
Yeah.
into this practice.
Yeah, sure. Totally. Because I mean, that's a really good point, because there are times where, you know, it's like, I need to focus. Let's really get this going. Let's focus, you know? And then when I focus, I'll overdo it and I will see myself slipping into a dull agitation, or sorry, a subtle dullness. And when I see that happening, and it kind of feels a bit, I don't know, I don't want to say depressed, but there is like it is, it's down, right? It's a downer. There's a subtle like dullness. It's like a dull blade, right? There's not a crispness to it. And I can feel that sense. So then I'll overcompensate and I'll get agitated, or I'll just try to like amp myself up. And so that I'm extra focused. And then I think there for sure are times where you overdo it, and it could feel like it's bliss because you're feeling something from having been dull, from being down. You have an upper in a way, you know, and you've almost overdone it. Sure. And that happens like not just on the cushion, but it just happened like, I don't know. I just think about like when I'm working, I have these moments where I'm like, figure this out. I got to focus. I focus, you know, and I get kind of blah about it, and I can feel the blahness, you know, or the being uninspired, you know, however way that looks. And I'll swing the other way. And suddenly I'm like pumped up and I'm jazzed. But that's not where I need to be. You know, I've almost tipped to the other side. Right. And so you have these interesting things that happen in your meditation where it does kind of swing one way and it goes the other. And it's not, by the way, this isn't like 9 steps, you're stuck in subtle dullness all the time. You'll fling back and forth between these 2 stages for quite some time. You'll kind of undulate, and you'll kind of go up and down until you get to the point where it will then steady itself out. So it's not like, you know, next week, subtle dullness, everyone, you know, week 7, subtle agitation, you know, it doesn't work that way. I wish it does. But so these are like 9, you know, there are 9 stages, and they'll move. Like some days you'll know that you're on stage 1, and that's all it's going to be for today, and that's okay. And other times you'll feel like as you start to practice, it will move up a little bit, and then it'll move down. And you know, anyone who's ever practiced instruments. I don't know. This is like, it's like you practice and you feel like you've gotten it. Do you ever feel that? And then you maybe feel like you've hit this plateau and you're ready for the next one, and you're just, it doesn't go, or you didn't practice for a week and then you just felt like you stepped back so many steps and you feel like it was just all for nothing, right? Or if you ever trained physical training, I have not, but from what I've heard, so it's that same idea. I mean, it's interesting to see, you know, is it the body or is it the mind, right? Like, what is it, right? So, so that's what's happening between these stages of 5 and 6. You're going to be moving back and forth. But the good news is at this point, you have a sense of concentration. You can stay on the object. You're not working hard on trying to keep the object at this point. What you're working on is identifying whether or not you can sense the subtleties of your dullness and your agitation. It's different. Before, in the beginning, you're just trying to do everything to not even wander, right? Now you're not wandering, no problem. That's not a concern that you have at this point, right? You've got the object, but you have these dullnesses and agitations that keep flickering around your object at this point. Yeah. But if once you finish stage 6, at this point, in the scriptures, they say your watchfulness is complete. It's your watchfulness that's going to get you up to stage 6, right? So that process of being able to master your watchfulness at this point has happened. Okay. Number 7, can you say Nampar, Shiwar, Jepa? Nampar, Shiwar, Jepa. Nampar is totally, Shiwar is peace, and Jepa is make it. So at this stage, you're making your mind totally calm. So at the 7th stage, because at this point your watchfulness and your recollection, your ability to recall the image, are totally complete, it's difficult for dullness and agitation to occur. So this is what the graphic looks like. At this point, you do not need to worry about, you don't have to be too concerned about subtle dullness and agitation happening. The idea is that it takes effort to get onto your object. There's kind of a let's do this moment, but once you're on your object, you go straight, and the subtle dullness and agitation is really not something you need to be too concerned about. It's still there. They're just not attacking you. They're not, you can see it much more. You don't have to find it. You can identify it a lot more. Before you just get a sense of trying to understand if it's subtle dullness or agitation. How do I remove it? And it feels still like the subtle dullness and agitation is coming at your focus. And at this point, it's not doing that. You have a handle of it. You can understand how to preempt it. You aren't too concerned about it in any way ruining the quality of your meditation. It takes effort to get onto your object, but once you're in it, you can sit into it very quickly and you're on it. And it's almost like, I don't know, cruise control a little bit, right? Like you still have to steer and you still have to know when to stop and go, but it's a bit like cruise control.
So it seems a little bit like when we take do the 2-part meditation.
Yeah.
You stop for a brief period, and then you start up again. It just seems a lot easier.
Yeah.
The second time to get right back into
Yeah.
where it was 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
all of the mental noise.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Number 8. Can you say chetu? Jepa. Again, say chetu. Jepa. So say chetu is one pointed and jepa is make it. This is bringing the mind to one, not one point, but really one mind or one object, right? Or not one object, really one. We talked about point. It's not like a single point, but it's one mind is a nice way to think of it. Like, so at this point, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I messed up. This is at this point, it takes, sorry guys, this point, it takes effort to get on your, this is cruise control. 7 is not cruise control. 7, you're still working. You have subtle agitation and dullness that exists that are there. It's not attacking you, but you can identify it. It's still taking you effort, but you're not cruise controlling. You're cruising at this level, at stage 8.
So the graph in the 7 is more like patches of the other ones that don't really bother. You can still have them, but they're not. It looks like a dotted line.
Yeah, that's right. You can still have them. They're just not constant.
They're not constant, right?
Yeah.
They're not streams.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. From this level up, you don't actively have to, because you're cruising, you don't actively have watchfulness happening that you need to start up. It's just, it's becoming it's easy. And almost in a way, once you've started and you know what your object is, there is an ease, it's effortless. You're not having to work to be watchful of, is there agitation, is there not? There is no subtle dullness or agitation at all at this point. Okay. And the last one, can you say nampar? Jokpa. Again, nampar, jokpa. So nampar is even, and jokpa is to place the mind on the object. What do you think this would be? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So at this point, you're able to be in deep meditation. You have full focus, right? It's a full level of concentration. You have to reach the 9th stage in order to then even consider the next stage, which not in the next stage, but to be able to have meditations where you can perceive emptiness directly. It is shamatha. It takes practice. You have both clarity, fixation, right, and intensity. And then within the shamatha practice, it would then move you to vipassana, which is an emptiness practice. So shamatha, these 9 stages are really about being able just to be able to focus on the object, and have clarity, intensity, and fixation on the object. Vipassana then goes into the emptiness of the object, right? So today, we were dabbling a little bit in that, right? When we look at the emptiness of the mind, or even considering, where does a mind exist, or does it exist, and how does it exist? That's a little bit of dabbling into Vipassana right there. So that gives you a little taste of what emptiness meditations can be like. But we will, I mean, we'll do that again. But a lot of the meditations that we'll also continue doing for the remainder of this course will be a shamatha based practice to get you to be still. And what I would recommend for all of you is, if you're keeping a journal of your meditations, just write which number you think you're at, which stage you're at. It might be nice to just mark it that way and get a sense. If we can do like a big numbers chart, daily practice. Maybe not. Yes.
These stages, is this like a cycle that, like, let's say you're someone who's been meditating for 20 years, like
Yeah.
an advanced practitioner. Is this something that you still will cycle through? Like let's say something happens in your life, like you lose a job, you go through a divorce, like things happen, or do you reach a certain point where like your mind doesn't go back to stage one?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. But so I don't have any reference or teachings that I know of that I've gotten in particular to answer your question. But I think it would be fair to say that depending where you are as you practice, I mean, just because you practice 20 years obviously doesn't mean that you've had a quality meditation, right? So assuming that you've had a quality, I mean, first of all, once you've had the direct perception emptiness, there's a lot of things you're probably never going to go back to stage one. I think that's fair to say. But I do think that it's fair to say that you can cycle through. I mean, if you haven't reached shamatha, which takes a long time, if you're not doing consistently, then you'll probably be within the first 9 phases or 9 stages for quite some time. You'll probably go back and forth a little bit. Yeah.
I've heard a teaching from Alan Wallace.
Yeah.
And he was talking. He goes to retreats,
Yeah.
long retreats. And he was talking about his students, and he's like, "Yeah, I have a couple of students that have reached stage 7.
Oh yeah.
And these are people that have been in meditation retreat for like a year or so."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and one of the girls had to leave because her family member was sick.
Yeah.
She didn't want to leave because like it would mean that she would be maybe like depressing her practice.
Yeah.
Because it takes so much effort and like still like quiet and stillness to get to these stages that you can definitely like go back in your practice and cycle through for sure.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
with shamatha, I'm not even
totally.
sure if you reach shamatha, like you still have to maintain that until you have the direct perception.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. No, I think that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a constant. I mean, the thing is that I'm just thinking of stories I have of other practitioners I know that have a pretty deep practice, and and at some point things happen, and sometimes, and there's a lot of different things that can happen. Of course, you can go back to stage 1 where you just can't even get on the object. There's people that I know that are incredible practitioners and just stop meditating altogether one day. There's that too. So, but one thing I will also note that Alan has talked about, and also Geshe Michael has also brought up as well, is you can reach shamatha in 6 months if you're doing it diligently. And Alan has students who have reached that in a 6-month period. So it's not something that's like the lifetime thing. I mean, it obviously could be, but it's something that you can do in a much short period of time if you're training properly. It's, shamatha is something that all of you guys could reach, for sure. That's not like an crazy idea I mean, first of all, none of these ideas are considered crazy ideas although for me at the moments where I'm like, when am I going to see the direct perception emptiness? Like it feels, when you think about these 9 stages, it can feel daunting. Um, but I'm sure that every marathon runner at some point felt like running all those miles is probably incredibly daunting too. So it takes a steady amount of practice. Um, but yeah, I think that to Stephen's point, he's right. You know that you can sway back just because you've made it to a certain point. Because even when we've talked about this too with like the different stages, right? Of even when you've had the direct perception of emptiness, you're not just good to go. You come back out of it, and you have to continue to rehabituate your mind of what it is that you experience. It's not a free token and you're just good. I mean, there's still quite a bit that happens between your direct perception of emptiness and enlightenment. You know, there's a lot of stages that happens in between that. So there is a constant training. I suspect, though, that if you have a certain level of training and you've gotten to, let's say, stage 7, you'll be able to probably get quicker through the first few stages. You know, it's not going to be as difficult, and you'll be able to identify it probably quicker. You're not going to be wondering what it is. You'll pretty much know, and then kind of retrain back up, you know, kind of like riding a bike or riding a bike again. Anyway, any other questions for
Did you
tonight?
say you're at the line or you reached the line?
Oh, no.
Don't know when
It depends on my meditations. Um, I started doing shamatha less than a year ago, I would say, like diligently. I've done shamatha off and on for a few years. And I feel like when I'm in deep retreat for about a 2-week period, I feel like I'm probably tipping somewhere into like 5 or 6 when it's really good for me. Like I think I can start to get a sense of subtle agitation and dullness, but I don't think I've surpassed it. You know, I think it just takes, and it's also not necessarily, it also depends on not my retreat in itself, but the year leading up to my retreat. So if I'm not practicing the year into my retreat will be, I mean, I've had retreats where it's probably a 4 or a 5. You know, I'm just lucky I could just even stay on the topic and not forget it, but just to wander. Yeah, you know. Um, and it also depends on how long my sits are, you know, because some of my sits can be very long. I mean, and it's modifications, right? Like even testing and doing these short sprints with you guys, that's something new that I'm also testing out too, you know. Because sometimes I've had, like, usually I do 4 sessions a day when I'm in retreat, and those sits can be long. They're usually 2.5 hours. Um, and that's long. It's a long time. And so it gets a little sloppy, and it can. And so there's these, in the middle of my retreat, when it's the very best, it will get more refined. But even my last retreat, it's changed where I don't do 4 sits because I found it distracting. And so I end up doing 3 sits that are longer. They're usually 3.5 hours each, you know, but I'll break them up and figure out ways to cut it and divide it to train. But using specifically Alan Wallace's meditation style, which is what I'm practicing now, which is what I'm teaching you guys for the meditation component, um, is something that I did the retreat last year when I was teaching, and have been doing that for the past year, I would say, you know, and it vacillates, right? Um, I think when I'm in the city, probably a 4 is average for me, you know. And so when I come out of retreat, let's say I even get to a stage 5, right? And I'm coming out of retreat and I'm feeling really good. Last year, I think I was probably around a stage 5. And, you know, it's interesting. It came out, and my teacher, who gave me retreat instructions, you know, was very clear about what I had to do to just maintain a stage 5. And that was, it's 90 minutes a day. And he's like, that's just to maintain it. Forget about getting past it. Because I would have conversations and I'm like, how do I move forward? And he's like, you go back in 3 months, like back into retreat. Like, I can't do that. I'm like, what do I do now? He goes, 30 minutes a day, or not, an hour and 30 minutes a day, and that has been incredibly hard to do. So I slip, you know. So the thing too about these meditations, guys, is that as you do your practice, the goal isn't to realize how far you need to go necessarily. Sometimes just to realize that you're trying is good. I mean, that's most people, you have to remember, most people in this world that you are around aren't even at stage 1. Okay. So the fact that you can even sit your butt down and do a 5-minute or a 15-minute is something that you should realize how extraordinary that effort is. And even if you're at stage 1 and you're just on an object for a hot minute and that's it, and the rest of the 7 minutes is you just thinking about nothing or trying to just stay awake, or just totally in la la land, that's okay. That's where you start. At least you know that, and then you build from there. So it's easy to get hard on yourself and be like, this sucks, and this is so hard to do, and I'm never gonna whatever. But it's also the point of it isn't to critique like, this list isn't here to evaluate yourself every day and be like, where are you? It's just to give you a sense of you being accountable and understanding the subtleties of what this stuff looks like. Because there are a lot of times where you think that you're meditating and it's really good because you're now sitting for a full 9 minutes, and that was something you couldn't even do before, but your mind is all over the place. That's okay. Now you know. And the fact is that your mind is probably all over the place all the time. So there is a sense of, be honest to yourself. There are times where people will do meditations and they think they had these amazing experiences, right? Like, I was talking to you guys last week about how I thought I was having these amazing experiences. And then one of my teachers, Doug Beanhoff, basically told me that I was just dull. And I was in this hallucinate, I was like, I'm feeling all this stuff. And he's like, you were hallucinating basically because you were falling asleep and you were dull. But it was so subtle. And I just thought I was doing a really great job. Because he's amazing. No, he knew from the way that I explained it. And he probably knows because he's experienced it. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to have teachers that meditate, or have some sort of meditation practice so that you can explain. Because I would have these experiences and these sits that felt so magical, I guess is the word I want to use, which is probably the trigger for him to be like, and I would explain exactly what I was going through, what was happening, and thinking that I was at a certain stage and I was going to take it to the next step. And in fact, the step that I had to do was I had subtle dullness happening. I wouldn't even say it's subtle. It probably was a gross dullness that I didn't even know it was gross. And it's interesting because the more you start to delve into this, you realize the subtleties of it all, and the more acutely aware you become about your own mind and the subtleties of your mind, right? And so that's the biggest thing. Like, this is going to lead you to on the short term, self-awareness, which, you guys, I mean, that is just, there's so much to be said about self-awareness, and so much benefit that you have of understanding that. And then it will just take you from here on up to so many other things that you can start to see. And shamatha being one of the other things, moving to vipassana, or an emptiness type of meditation, and starting to get an understanding intellectually of what emptiness even means, and then having an experience of it and completely changing your worldview. That's what you're trying to do. So it takes time. So don't be too hard on yourself. Don't use this as a marker of how good you are or how unsuccessful you may be. It's just a way to gauge and to keep you honest. That's really what it is. So that you're not walking around thinking, you know, I'm a meditator in a sense where do you really understand the subtleties of what that means, you know? And don't be down on yourself, but if you're able to articulate and know what phase you are, what stage you're at, and what are the things you struggle with, and you have a teacher that you can talk to, then you can start to play with different antidotes. You know, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. How do we start to play with it? And you can, and your meditation should, in some ways, be customized to you and where you're at and what you need. You know, it's not the same meditation for everybody. That doesn't make any sense. We're all coming from different places, you know, and different experiences. So, okay, good, nice. All right.
Sashi Puki Jushin Mento Tram Rira Minshi Minde Impagi Sange Shindu Nite Wargi Jokuam Nanda Shima Triparsho Idam Ruranamanda Kamyatayami Gewa Kero Sunam Yeshe Sokso Sunam Yeshe Lejumwe Dampa Kuni Toparsho.
Take a moment and rejoice for coming to class tonight, taking the time out of your schedule to make learning about meditation a priority for yourself. Really commend yourself and your effort. And dedicate your effort to somebody that you know that's out there. Who's in need of some sort of support, help, love. Wish them everything that their heart desires. And consider how your meditation practice could potentially save them from their suffering. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.